Good morning. Today is the 13th day of Tishrei and the 28th of September. And as promised yesterday, we're going to look at one more final aspect of unity in the four species that we take on Sukkot: the palm frond, the citron, the myrtle branches, and the willows. If you remember, yesterday we read the verses from Leviticus that describe these four species, and I want to repeat them again in the beginning so that we can see a very unique medrash, meaning a homily on this from Rabbi Akiva. So the verses were, "And you shall take on the first day the fruit of beautiful trees." We said that was the citron, etrog, branches of palm trees, and that is the palm frond, the lulav, and boughs of leafy trees, that refers to the myrtles, the hadas, and willows of the brook, the Aravot, the willows. And you shall rejoice before Avaya your God for 7 days. Now, the way that the sages, most of the sages agreed, was that the way to read this is that you need one palm frond, one citron, 3 myrtle branches, and 2 willows. However, there's always a different opinion, and in this case, the different opinion is Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva's opinion is that you take one of each, not 3 myrtles and not 2 willows, 1 myrtle and 1 willow, 1 hadas and 1 aravot. This goes together with a beautiful medrash from Rabbi Akiva that doesn't show up in the Talmud. It appears in Yilkut Shimoni. Yilkut Shimoni is a collection of midrashim, of homilies. Not always do we know exactly where the original source was. Yilkut Shimoni was compiled long after the Talmud was finished. We don't always know where the source is, but here we have a medrash from Rabbi Akiva who says like this. And listen to this, how special this is. Rabbi Akiva says, the fruit of a beautiful tree, remember we said this is the citron. So he says, that is the blessed Holy One, meaning this refers to God. As it says about him, you are clothed in beauty and majesty. That's Psalms 104:1. Next he says, the branches of palm trees, palm frond, the lulav. Again he says, that is the blessed Holy One. As it says about him, the tzaddik will flower like a palm. That's from Psalms 92:13. Then the boughs of leafy trees. What is that about? The myrtle branches, right? But he says, what is this? That is the blessed Holy One. As it says about him, and he is standing among the myrtles, from Zachariah 1:8. Finally, willows of the brook, the Aravot. You wanted to know what that is about? That is the blessed Holy One. As it says about him, Extol He who rides the Aravot. The Aravot is the name of one of the 7 firmaments. So God is riding the firmaments, says Rabbi Akiva. That is his connection to the willow brook, the willow of the brook. That's in Psalm 68:5, and that's also talking about God. So what do we have here? That when Rabbi Akiva looks at the 4 species, he doesn't see what most people see. He sees God in all 4 of them. He sees all 4 of them as representing God. And what about this is God? Well, the way to understand this is that God is represented by 4 different types of beauty, or hadar. The name of the citron is a tree, the fruit of a beautiful tree, hadar. And all the 4 species have to be beautiful. So even if you take the willows, which don't seem to have either taste or smell, they still have to be beautiful to the sight. All 4 species need to be beautiful. And in Rabbi Akiva's eyes, what they are exemplars of is of 4 different aspects of beauty of the unity of God. And that's why he says in the end, and we're connecting these two together, it doesn't say this anywhere explicitly, but that's why he says in the end that of each of the species, you only take one piece. One palm frond, one citron, one myrtle branch, and one willow. So what we need to look now at is how each one of these represents godliness, the unity of God, and the beauty of God. So let's start with, in general, we said that Sukkot is a time of our joy. Joy is going beyond the humdrum of life. Joy is what stands beyond. The same thing is true about beauty. I think there's actually a book I once read, probably the first three pages of, by Extol He, and he says, the moment that a plant made a flower, that was the beginning of spirituality. Because in that sense, who needs the flower? You don't need the flower. The flower, the beauty, is beyond. The same thing is with the Little Prince. Whoever read The Little Prince, Saint Exupery, he also has the same idea that I need the flower in order to have purpose. Beauty goes beyond the survival instinct of man. It goes beyond what we need practically. And in that sense, all four species need to be beautiful. They need to represent that which is beyond. In the same way that what we'll look at here is also some aspects of looking at beauty and seeing godliness. So we'll start with the myrtle. The myrtle, we said, the hadas, has 3 leaves coming out of each nest. So this is definitely an example of symmetry. It's all 3 around the central stem, and they cover it. So this is the beauty found in symmetry. Symmetry is very interesting because symmetry, why do we find symmetry beautiful? Because it gives our eyes a chance to rest. When you see symmetry, the world makes some sense. You're overwhelmed by the stimuli in the world. When you find a place that has symmetry, you find a place of comfort. So in a certain sense, what Rabbi Akiva is describing is that there is comfort in God because there is understanding, there is meaning, there you can make sense of what you're looking at. Without God, you live in a world that is fraught with demons, and there's no way to explain it. The way we explain this, and you can't get into it now, the way we explain this is that the moment that you put God in the center of your life, it's almost like Copernicus putting the sun in the center of the solar system and making it much easier to calculate how all the planets revolve around the sun. When God is in the center, life begins to make sense. It becomes a symmetry in life, an easier way to understand things. But there's something beyond this, because we said that the verse he chooses is, and he was standing between the myrtles, among the myrtles, the verse from Zachariah. The sages say that these myrtles represent Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. There were 3 of the exile taken from Judea in their childhood to serve before the king of Babylon. And then he wanted to martyr them because they wouldn't bow down to his statue that he made. But God stood between them and saved them from the fire. That leads to a beautiful explanation of what the whole myrtle is talking about. The myrtle represents, if you want, a type of symbol that even though God is everywhere, there's also a central stem. There's God can also concentrate himself into one particular place. That's what it means that he saved these 3 martyrs from the fire, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He stood between them, as it were. We have the same image as God standing, the divine presence standing between the boughs of the ark of the covenant, the boughs that were used to carry it. There's an idea that even though God is everywhere, again, creating something like everything is equal, now we have this notion that God is in the center. And in this sense, this is also connected to symmetry, because God is like the center of everything around us. That's the beauty of it. It creates beauty by making it understandable. There's a custom because of this, because the myrtles are so important, because they're the most beautiful out of all the four species. There's a custom to not take 3, but to actually take 68 myrtle branches in the 4 species. If you ever saw the Lubavitcher Rebbe's 4 species, it looks like a big bouquet, and the reason is because he has 68 hadassim, and his 68 is the value of lulav. It's also the value of life, and many other things. It also happens to be the value of 1 less than hadas. Hadas is 69, so 68 plus what we call the kola would become 69, the value of hadas. The willow branches remind us of the beauty of the inanimate, because they have no smell, they have no taste. That which does not seem to have life of its own. The verse that Rabbi Akiva selected, God is riding his chariot, as it were, through the firmament called Aravot, the firmament called Willows. The beauty of the chariot is in the way that it serves the rider. So this is a type of mechanistic beauty, like all the pieces coming together to be able to serve the rider, in this case, God. And that is a beautiful description of the Jewish people, that in a certain sense, what the Jewish people are meant to reveal is far beyond what each one of us can individually. And in that sense, and this is a sense that we're maybe far from today, every individual becomes like part of the mechanism, becomes part of the chariot. The citron's verse that he chose was, God wears, he clothes himself in beauty and majesty. This is clearly the beauty of garments. The beauty here is the beauty of what we always say are the garments of God, the mitzvot, the wearing of the commandments. And here there's an understanding that even though, and this comes specifically from the citron, which is likened to a heart, that even though the heart wants to cling to God, it wants to connect to God, it realizes at some point that it's impossible to contain God inside the heart. And then it understands that the way to reach God, the way to hold him, as it were, is through these garments, through the mitzvot. That is the beauty of garments, the understanding that I can't be naked. I have to wear something to show, and to, especially by women, this is this way, to highlight my features. The only way I can bring my features out is through things I wear. By the way, this is not just clothing, this is also in jewelry, a very deep topic discussed in Chassidus. Finally, the palm frond is God's essential beauty. Here we have to say that the palm frond is just talking about God himself. What is God's beauty in and of himself? Here he's likened, the verse that Rabbi Akiva chose was, he will flourish, like he will flower like the tzaddik will flower like a palm. So the palm frond, it represents the simplicity. When you look at it, it's just a straight line, a one-dimensional straight line. The simplicity is where the beauty is. And yet still, beyond the simplicity, there's also the promise of the flourishing, the flowering in the future. Because the tzaddik will flower. God will be known again. We talked about this many times, that in the situation that we have now in the world, we don't walk around with an air of knowing of God's presence in the same way that we know of other things. Everybody knows that you shouldn't steal. Almost in every single country in the world, people know this. It's in the air. You shouldn't commit adultery. It's in the air. There's something wrong with it. Even if people do it, they know they're doing something wrong. When it comes to God's presence, God has concealed himself. So certain aspects of him are revealed, like these prohibitions that have become staples of human morality. But the feeling that they had in the time of the temple, that they could literally cut the air, it was like feeling like you could feel the holiness in the air, that has been gone for 2 millennia. But eventually it will flower again, it will flourish again, the palm frond will open again, and it will become like a fill. It will fill all the air around it. as it was in the past. So this is a very beautiful meditation from Rabbi Akiva about the unity of God revealed through each one of the four species in its particular way. Thank you very much for joining. Hope to see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Rabbi.